And just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward, always getting closer, I'm marching till it's over. And just like a soldier, I keep on moving forward.
Hello and welcome back to MangaMuse, guys. This is the fourth part of What If Naruto Enters Genshin. Make sure to like, share, subscribe and also press the bell icon so that you never miss a great update. Also make sure to check out the wonderful author NeonZangetsu on FANFICTIONnet. Well, let's continue with the story now.
Paimon pounced. To be fair, she did a rather good job of it. Naruto was quite distracted and didn't sense the little fairy's leap until the very last second. Even then he wasn't exactly in a position to do anything about it, given his arms were full of Nahida at the moment. But then the cheeky little goddess hopped out his arms and he found himself distracted for that crucial second. And his little travel guide struck him like a starry meteor. Paimon missed you. Naruto didn't bother to brace himself. He knew full well Paimon wouldn't be satisfied until she'd gotten this out her system. So he let her have her way with him, fussing and fawning over him like the enthusiastic child she just might be. Her emotions were a riot of positive gleeful delight and he drank them in all in like a man dying of thirst. Even then he gave her a full 30 seconds to expend her energy before lazily looping an arm over to draw her close and nuzzle her cheek against his. Naruto missed you too, he sing-songed back at her, mimicking her speech in a high, reedy voice, but Naruto wishes you wouldn't tackle him all the time. Hey, she squirmed in his arms and squinted at him. Paimon doesn't sound like that. I dunno, it's been a while, I almost forgot what you sounded like. She whimpered a little, starry eyes shining with tears. No. Not having with that. Kidding, he clutched her closed, pressing his head to hers. Really, I was just teasing you. Come on. Don't cry. She warbled a little and tucked her head into his chest. Okay, but never leave Paimon like that again. It's not the same when the real you isn't around. Alright, he placed a chaste kiss atop her forehead. It's a promise. You better keep it. He knew she hadn't come alone, of course. Hello, dear. Lisa confirmed that not a moment later, stepping into him to grace him with a quick kiss on the cheek, not so discreetly pressing herself into his side. You look well. Enjoying your vacation? Yes, he queried. Sorry for the delay, I've been busy over here. Her hand lingered on his chest as her lips brushed his ear. You can make it up to me and Shinha later. Loudly. Enthusiastically. Paimon tilted her head. Kurama cackled inside his mind. Nahida observed him in bemused silence. Oh, that was kinky. Naruto's entire face went completely scarlet. Or so it was until he heard someone tapping their foot. He turned to face Shinha and raised a hand in greeting. Hey! Hope my clones weren't too much of a bother. No reaction whatsoever. Arms folded beneath her bosom and pale eyes stern, the Adeptus disciple continued to stare at him. Whoa! You're angry, aren't you? The tapping intensified tenfold. They clones weren't good enough. They broke too easily. Oh, dear. He'd forgotten just how emotional she could be without her red ropes. Shinha stalked forward at a brisk pace, Peach swaying with every step, but paused just out of arm's reach. She made no move to touch him or otherwise be touched. Paimon drifted backward in the air with a nervous murmur. I think you ticked her off. She really wasn't happy with him. But what had he done wrong? He'd kept his word, hadn't he? What the heck was he supposed to do in a situation like this? Nahida and the others were no help at all, they just stared at him, as though expecting him to magically fix this somehow. He tried to rack his mind and came up with nothing. No, wait, he'd read something about this in a book the other day, hadn't he? Seemed like a bit of long shot here, but really, what did he have to lose? Not much, judging by the increasingly blank look she was giving him. Hopefully she would be receptive to it. Steeling himself, Naruto took a quick step forward and took her by the hand before she could think to draw back. He felt every fiber of her being tense in angry indignation. Just before he knelt, raised her knuckles to his lips and kissed them. It was a classic pose, and the book he'd read had been most descriptive about among other things. Paimon made baffled Paimon noises. Lisa hummed appreciatively. Maybe she'd read that book. Very nice, she declared with a pleased coo. Good DLVRY, smooth execution and lovely technique, not to mention a lovely technique. Ignoring the lustful librarian and her teasing, he focused on the frozen fighter before him. Because that's what Shinha was, you see. A fighter. Without her red ropes restraining her emotions, she was more a warrior than ever, and damn it, she acted like one, or she had, until she'd frozen, gone still as stone like the very cryo-vision she wielded. I missed you. The ice in her eyes cracked. You did? He nodded slowly. More than anything. A lone tear tumbled out her eye, rolled down her cheek, caressed her chin and struck the floor. For the life of him, he couldn't tell if it was a happy one or not. Her emotions were a whirling stream, impossible for even him to decipher here in this given moment. I don't understand. In many ways, Shinha was pure, so he felt she could be forgiven for what came next. Why are you kissing my hand? I want you to kiss me on the lips, I want you to hold me. Laughter bubbled up in him. All right, now that, he could understand. He stood and drew her into his arms. Like this? No. Shinha shook her head. Like this. She lunged up at him. Her mouth met his hungrily, hands linking behind his back in a searing kiss that left him breathless. Ah, I see. Nahida hummed happily. So this is what true romance looks like. I didn't think it would be passionate. Pain gagged. What the heck? Now, Lisa covered her eyes with one hand. This is no sight for children. Clothes, Shinha all but growled the world upon pulling away. Off. Now. Oi. We're out in public. We can't do that here. A slow, baffled blink. Why not? Explaining would have taken too much time. He settled for a long-suffering look instead. Would you want people watching us? Or interrupting us? I suppose not. Shinha allowed at last. I would have to end them, and that would be messy. Tonight, then. She latched onto his arm. Latched hard, and turned a fearsome pout upon him, clinging onto his body with intent, looping an arm around his waist. She wasn't letting go any time soon. No running off again. As if she'd let him. I'm not getting my arm back, am I? No, her fingers bit into his sleeve. You are not. Fine. Speaking of sights, he turned to Lisa and the still squirming Paimon. Where's Beidou and everyone else? Well, Lisa released the exasperated fairy and touched a finger to her chin. Our dear captain said she had someone she needed to meet. Klee promised to help Lumen find her brother, which meant Amber got dragged along for the ride, and then Maeve took an interest in their plight and offered to watch over them for a bit. That slacker. She just didn't want to return to Liyue. But yeah, he could see why those three would want to distance themselves from Mondstadt at the moment. So? Where are they now? Lisa giggled. About that they may have gotten distracted by treasure. For the love of loot goblins, the lot of them. Paim huffed. You're one to talk. Hold it right there. Lumen blinked. Hard. I'm sorry, she poked her head out the chest she'd been rummaging in and pivoted in place, heels kicking up a tiny plume of dust underfoot. Is there a problem? In short order she found herself facing a band of goons wearing red sashes and mismatching armor, led by some burly brute with more muscles than sense. She didn't bother to memorize their faces nor their numbers. It looked like there were at least 10, which explained the arrogant grins plastered across their faces. She wasn't best pleased at the moment. That last chest hadn't held anything interesting or useful, leaving her stuck with this pitiful sword and no armor to speak of. What's worse, she was fairly certain that she'd gotten herself turned the wrong way round in her quest for loot. Lisa, Shinha, and the strange little fairy calling herself Paimon had made a beeline for the city, leaving them right behind. So, yes. Much lost. Not happy was she. Not. At all. Blonde hair, traveler, and a fairy. He looked to Klee, who made a confused noise. We've got you all right. The mercenary leader spread his arms with a grin. Take a look around. You've fallen right into our trap. Amber planted one hand on her HP. Is that what you think this is? Still wasting time with idle chit-chat, are ya? We'll shut you up soon enough. Aryamites. Maeve took a deep breath and scowled. You dishonor your heritage. Excuse me? No, she smiled, I won't, but I will beat you black and blue. Perhaps then you will regain some small semblance of honor. Lumen looked back to the mercenaries. Their weapons weren't much better than her own pitiful gear. But their leader had a pair of curved swords. Curved swords. Nice weapons you got there. Amber drew her bow back, shaking her head. And just like that, you went and flipped her SWCH. Maeve drew herself up with a languid sigh. I suppose we shouldn't ignore them. Lumen rubbed her palms together with a giggle. You get me? Cookie tilted her head, pure as the driven snow. Kaboom? Yes, Klee. Kaboom. Lumen move a finger at her latest victims ahem, foes. Yes, definitely not victims, and she certainly wasn't going to take those curved swords for herself, no siree. Much kaboom. Kaboom away. They jumped them. So that's what happened. Naruto palmed his face. He could have sworn he heard a distant explosion just then. Well, that's unfortunate. I was looking forward to spoiling Klee. Will you be returning to Mondstadt anytime soon? Lisa asked. Shinha clung just a little tighter to his arm. Naruto noticed. Kurama blanched right alongside him. Right, Mondstadt. Nope. Nah. He didn't want to go back yet. I'll head that way eventually. He made a vague gesture with his hand. I'm kinda helping out the Archon of this land at the moment. Everyone looked about. Shinha frowned first. Where is she? Nahida raised a hand. Over here. And all heck broke loose. So cute. Is she a child? She's so small that Paimon didn't even see her. Ahem. Naruto coughed into a fist before they could swarm the poor girl. Are we not at all concerned about Klee and the others? Not at all? Paimon lifted her chin, floating just a touch higher. They'll be fine, they've got enough firepower between them to level a mountain. A blonde brow rose. And you know that how? Did you encourage Klee to use said firepower on the journey over here? And never mind that. Paimon's more interested in tea festival. Will there be food? Of course there will. Nahida was all too happy to step up, heedless of Shinha's still baffled stare. There'll be all sorts of dishes, candies, not to mention desserts. Then sign Paimon up. Great, he hummed. I'll have a word with Nilo. Shinha bridled. Nilo? That's a girl's name. More competition. Be nice. He flicked her forehead. She whined a little but held her tongue. Wow, she's whipped. Lisa made an amused noise. I wouldn't mind being. None of that. You're originally from Sumeru, aren't you? I am, yes, she gave him a strange look, mildly intrigued. Why? Great, he took her by the shoulder and steered her forward. You'll be lending us a hand. All right, stand to, people. We've got a country to fix. Nilo noticed. How could she not? Naruto was right there, walking toward the stage, towards her. A strange feeling bubbled up in her chest at his approach, like a rising tide threatening drowning her every thought, a riptide ready drag her under. She'd known for a while now that the Lord Anemo Archon was bringing in allies from the east, but she hadn't quite expected this. First there was the adorable little fairy, oh my sweet Archon Chisokiyut, perched atop his shoulders, clinging to his head, looking this way and that like an curious child, happily exclaiming at everything she saw. Nilo smiled a bit at the sight of her. Said smile died an ugly death when she saw women draped about Naruto's arms, tall and buxom in a way she couldn't yet be. They were certainly something. Was that the right word to use? And why did her chest ache all of a sudden? Such a strange sensation. Oh, my. The woman in purple eyed her up and down as though she were some marvelous morsel to be devoured. Is this here, then? You didn't say how pretty she was. She's like a lovely little flower yet to bloom. It makes me want to water her and see what she'll grow into. Nilo flushed. Thank you, I think. The new Archon sighed. Don't mind Lisa, she means well. Sorry about that, actually, come to think of it, I better apologize in advance. These two are a bit of a handful. Just be glad Beidou isn't here. Compared to these two, that one's a typhoon. This is Lisa, he gestured to the woman who'd spoken. Then we have Paimon. Hello, the little fairy waved happily. And last but not least there's Shinha. What's wrong? The woman with pale hair considered Nilo for a long moment. Followed by another. Then another. Another. She just kept staring, which meant Nilo had to stare back, lest she feel rude. Had she done something wrong? Why was this woman glaring frozen daggers at her? She'd never met someone so stern, so intimidating, so very raw. Just who was she, really? Shinha, Naruto elbowed her, this is Nilo. Be nice. The motion seemed to reactivated her for she looked to her suddenly. I have a question. You will answer it. Meep. Scary. Nilo forced herself to meet the older woman's eyes and not flinch. Why yes? Will you fight for him? Realization slapped her in the face. Oh, she understood now. So that's how it was. Nilo took a deep breath and forced herself to rally. I'm not all that strong, but I will dance for him, no, with him. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. I owe him at least that much for all he's done for our city. But you're weak. As if she didn't know that already. You're the one being weak here, not me. How am I weak? Shinha recoiled, eyes wide. I'm protecting him. You want to break his heart. Where in Teyvat had that come from? Nilo spluttered helplessly. I never said that. You will. He's been hurt enough. I won't let anyone else hurt him. None of that. Naruto slapped her flank. Behave. But I am. She's still alive, isn't she? Shinha. Nilo made her excuses and reeled away while the two began to bicker, clutching her scarlet, steaming face as Naruto rebuked the ice-cold woman. Oh dear sweet heaven, where had that come from? She usually wasn't this determined. But this was someone, she wanted to fight for. Maybe she wasn't as strong or pretty or smart as the others, but even so. Her heart wanted to understand what this feeling was. She wasn't going to give up. Not without a fight. You look awful. Jiraiya had to physically bite her lip to fight down a snort when next she saw the new Archon of Mondstadt near the wall of Samuel, if only because the blonde BSTRD really did look a proper sight. His clothes were tattered, his shoes battered, and was that a hickey on his neck? Strangers still their people. With him, strangers she didn't recognize. He spoke with them briefly and they reluctantly waited a few yards back as he loped her way. His stride was strong at least, despite the strained expression on his face. Jiraiya arched an eyebrow. You having fun? Not one word from you, Naruto growled as he traipsed out into the desert. Not another DMN word. She couldn't help but tease him as she followed, just a little. Or what? His spear appeared in a rush of light. All right, she raised her hands. I'll bite. What's your angle? Why'd you bring me out here? Angle? The Anemo Archon, she couldn't think of him as anything else after that display, banished his weapon and tilted his head to regard her as a curious fox might a lone lioness. I'm afraid I don't follow. Oh, so that's how he was gonna play it, eh? Jiraiya planted a fist on her peach and clocked her body to the right. Until you came by, Sumeru was run by the wise and mighty sages. To them, us desert dwellers are nothing but tools that can be discarded at their whim. We're cheap LBR like livestock, just easier to control. And you? Me, she shrugged one shoulder. As long as I can enjoy every day with a drink in my hand, tasty food in my stomach, and a good night's rest, that's enough for me. I must be the least ambitious person you've ever met, is what she would have liked to say, but the last part didn't necessarily ring true now, did it? I wouldn't be so sure about that. Yet here you are, bringing down to the wall of Samuel. I don't get you. Oh, you will, he grinned. I don't give a flying fig about this King Deshret guy. If he wants to resurrect and pick a fight with me, that's on him. I know gods that would have eaten him for breakfast. You want to see a god? I'll show you a god. He pressed both hands to the sand and snarled. Watch and learn. Deha felt the earth shift underfoot, no, the ground was shaking, now. Why? You know, I just love being underestimated. Naruto's voice rose over the rising tremors even now. It always makes me smile, you know. Azar and those idiots thought they knew true wisdom, rather, what a true sage was. They didn't have a clue, didn't even scratch the surface. Here. Lemme show ya. Dehaya looked past him. Wait, show me way omaizui tarkansho where doing that? Mistakes were made, because what she saw next boggled the imagination. See, that's it, right there. Naruto laughed over her cries, that's the look. Never gets old. Before her very eyes, he began to breathe life back into the desert. It was a slow, wondrous thing. She felt energy leave him, saw it thread its way into the sands, as though time itself were being undone in a mere matter of moments, seconds, minutes. No, it felt like hours. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, watching as the forest crept back across the sands, gradually overtaking the dunes bit by bit. It wasn't fast, nor was it quick and immediate, it was slow, gradual work. But it humbled her all the same. It's appealing. How did you? Dehaya turned to face him, baffled by his sudden stoic silence. All her joy and awe became so much ash in her mouth. Naruto had collapsed at her feet in the grass. Nahida wasn't happy. Naruto knew at the moment he opened his eyes to find himself in an unfamiliar bed with said goddess sat in a chair beside him. It would have been bad enough if she were actually awake, but no, she was very much out cold, and that was infinitely worse. So how did he know she was angry, you ask? Simple. She was scowling in her sleep. The faintest smile touched the corner. She must have dozed off at some point during her vigil, because she'd laid her head on her arms and passed clean out, heedless of the morning sunlight tickling her face. Honestly, the sight was adorable and made him wish he had a camera. He committed the sight to memory regardless, gave her head a gentle pat, and, careful not to wake her, dragged himself out of bed. The moment his feet hit the floor, her eyes snapped open. Oh, she yawned adorably and stretched both arms above her head with a languid sigh. Good morning. She must have remembered she was angry at him then, because her face dimpled in a scowl. You're awake? What did I say about overdoing it? What were you thinking? Whoa, hey, he flung up his hands to ward her off. Calm down. I'm fine, I just passed out. Just passed out? Something flitted through those lively green eyes of hers. He recognized the anger too late. Do you have any idea how long you've been asleep? He touched a finger to his chin, tried to think of a number and shrugged. A day? Nahida fell silent, hung her head, and tucked her chin into her chest. Naruto took a deep breath as he waited for her anger to pass. Are you all right? Definitely? Hopefully? Maeabe? Nahida hopped onto the bed and pinched his cheek. Nope. He winced as she yanked at his face. Not all right. Definitely not. You slept far longer than that. The little goddess released his face and plunked down beside him with a huff. The Sabzara's festival is tonight. SHT. Her birthday. He'd nearly slept through it. I was out for that long? He nearly guffawed, only to see the tears in her eyes. Well, DMN. Nahida was staring at him intently, worryingly so. What, the last thing you remember? His brow furrowed. I was just pouring some life back into Sumeru's desert. At the expense of your own, dummy. Was that her concern, here? I've got plenty. His fellow Archon pinched his lips between her thumb and forefinger, essentially sealing them shut. Yikes. She never did this, just how concerned was she? If you finish that sentence, she all but hummed the words, I will be very cross with you. Do you understand? He nodded. Times like these reminded him just how old she was. Heh. It felt kinda nice. Like having family. Good, she released him with a huff. Oh, my Archon, how did no one teach you this? Your life force isn't infinite. You've spent time you'll never get back. She looked like she wanted to give him a good hard shake, but he still didn't understand why. Do you even realize what you've done? A good thing? Well, yes, she sputtered, face flushing. Sumeru's desert has been gradually restoring itself since you passed out, but... He bolted upright, a smile tearing across his face. It has? I wanna see. No, she pushed him back down. Listen to me. She really was worried about him, wasn't she? No more. His pride prickled at the demand, but he rallied. Hey, I've got Kurama with me, remember? He won't let me die. Nahida seized him by the collar and dragged him down to her level to meet her verdant green gaze. Only then did he see the tears glimmering within her bright eyes, the sorrow shimmering in her soul. No more charging ahead on your own like that, do you hear me? Consult with me first. I won't let you throw your life away to save this country, do you hear? What could he do but nod? But when he tried to speak, he realized she wasn't finished. You're very dear to me, not only did you set me free from my cage, but you're my. She wanted to say something else, he could tell, but whatever it was, whatever it might be, she lacked the courage to follow through. For once, he didn't have the heart to press her. All right, he set his hands on hers. I'll be more careful in the future. She hiccuped a little. Promise? He held out his pinky finger to her and gave it an anticipatory wiggle. Sure think. Pinky promise. She curled her finger around his, hooked them together and gave his hand a shake. Okay. Nahida scrubbed at her eyes with the back of her hand. I trust you. Great. Now, come on. We've got a birthday to celebrate. He swept her up into his arms and bolted. A few enterprising souls had arrived in Sumeru since he slept. Truly there was no fast travel like Shadow Clone fast travel. His doppelgangers could carry people as well as gifts. Granted, it wasn't the most comfortable ride. Ergo, Sumeru City saw a sudden influx of guests, much to the dismay of the academia. Lisa read him like a book the moment she saw him approaching. Finally out of the doghouse are we, dear? Heat. Embarrassment. Shame. Naruto felt himself go red. Not another word from you, Lisa. She eyed the still smiling Nahida on his shoulder and cooed softly. I'll take that as a yes. You had us rather worried, we had to keep poor Paimon fed and happy this entire time. That said, a certain someone was terribly concerned about you. He didn't even have time to ask who. Shinha didn't so much appear as she did materialize, latching on to his arm like a limpet. Her pale eyes regarded him soulfully and stole a sigh from him. Good lord, if he was having this much trouble in Sumeru, he shuddered to think what the other nations would be like. Arguing was a bad idea, here. Could only bow his head. I'm sorry. She cuddled a little closer. You're forgiven. This time. Lisa coughed pointedly into her first. Ahem? Don't suppose you'd care for a dance? Ichim. She hummed in response and delivered a swift peck of her lips to his cheek. That's sweet of you. But I believe someone else deserves your attention tonight. Eh? Like a patient den mother, Lisa steered his gaze toward the stage. Only then did he notice Nilo standing atop it. Evidently, she'd begun dancing when he wasn't looking. He gazed upon her, and the very sight stole his breath away. Now, he knew he couldn't sit still after that. All right, then. Only one thing for it. Only then did he feel several pairs of eyes on him. Blast it all, he had to dance with everyone tonight, didn't he? Right, using this trick tonight might be unfair for everyone else in attendance, but so long as it made the ladies happy. He set Nihida down, wriggled free from a rather confused Shinha, crossed his fingers and flared his chakra. Time for an old favorite. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Dihaya tilted her head as she regarded the small army before her. Well, she whistled, now that's a handy skill to have. She couldn't even tell which was the real one. The moment Naruto created his army, they all turned and pivoted, circling the crowd rapidly as they picked their partners for the evening. In a matter of moments she lost sight of the original, each copy of him had paired off with someone, much to the amusement of those present. And would you look at that? The new Archon could dance. Was this the power of an emo? No, it felt different. Probably wasn't important. Thankfully she wasn't one to dance. Let the other girls have their spotlight. She'd just slip away when no one was looking and... A hand clamped down on Dihaya's shoulder, drawing a squeak from her. And where do you think you're going? Meep. A bead of sweat ran down her brow as she looked back to find Lisa smiling at her. It was not a nice smile, nevertheless, she tried to placate it. Away from here? I think not. Although her eyes were closed, the magician radiated killing intent. You're quite responsible for making that poor boy exhaust himself earlier, so it's only right you have to suffer through this. Wait. I can't dance. Then you had best learn, my dear. Lisa giggled and threw her at a shadow clone. Vengeance was sweet. Lisa couldn't help but preen a little as Dihaya was carried off to her doom and public humiliation, kicking and screaming like her namesake. Too bad, so sad. Really, it served the silly girl right. She couldn't even begin to comprehend just how weary Naruto was, and yet, she'd made him pass out. If she had her way, she would have taken a few fingers for that. Who cared about the restoration of some stuffy desert? Life would be so terribly boring without the Anemo Archon in her life. A finger tapped her shoulder. She turned to find another Naruto standing there. As she looked on he winked, sketched a courtly bow, and held out his hand to her. Well, she looked him up and down, letting her eyes feast upon him. Which one are you? The original, or a shadow clone? Whether he was a clone or not, Naruto took her lust in stride. Why not find out? Oh, he was a clever one. Lisa accepted his hand with a hum. Turnabout was fair play, she supposed. They danced the night away. Shinha did not know how to dance. She knew the steps of battle of course, put a spear in her hand and she could flow with the best, better than the rest, but here? She felt hesitant. Hot. Her heart hammered in her chest and her pulse pounded in her veins even as her ears rang. She'd never thought to miss her red ropes before, but now? She almost did. Naruto winced as she stepped on his foot again. She flinched. I'm sorry I can't dance. Easy fix. He tugged her closer and instinctively, she looped her arms behind his neck, linking her hands there, not to grab or strangle as one might think, but to hold on for dear life. It was nice all things considered, no sudden sharp movements to further inflame her anxiety, just a sweet, simple sway. Her heart calmed and she surrendered herself to the music. The Archon could dance after all. Very well indeed. Really. It came as a rather pleasant surprise to Nilo. She'd expected something when he offered to dance. It wasn't a dance as she knew it, not in the style she'd been taught, but she adored it all the same. Step 1 2 3 4, pivot and oh. A light laugh leaped from her lips as he spun her right round and they parted with a bow. She wasn't done with him yet, nor he, her. Nilo found herself silently amazed by his skill, Not only did he mimic her movements but he mirrored them, matched them, exceeded her wildest expectations. Let the worries of the world fade away for a while, tonight was a night to live. Klee clapped her hands and giggled in sheer delight. So many Narutos. Move over. This one's mine. Nahida scooted past her, hopped into the arms of the nearest, and was soon both the smaller girls were swept up into the madness. Naruto lingered on the outskirts. Even after creating countless clones, he'd lingered on a whim, made wary by habit. Festivals were often the perfect time for the enemy to strike. Call it experience. Call it paranoia. But he'd retreated from the revelry for a moment just to make certain no prying eyes were about tonight, fatuous or otherwise. On your right. His wariness was rewarded. He pivoted mid-step and found his target at long last. Hello, a young lady wrapped in a cloak waved his way cheerily as they approached. I seem to be lost. Might you direct me to the festival, good sir? Who was this outlandish girl and what was she doing here? Sure, he pointed, it's that way. I'm also looking for someone. She pressed her hands together with a happy chirrup. Might I avail myself of your services? Sure, why not, he muttered under his breath, everyone else seems to be doing that this week. Splendid, the baffling girl clapped her hands and hopped in place. Despite his best efforts, he found himself smiling nonetheless. Let's see here, she began counting off on the fingers of a gloved hand. I believe he's a rather tall fellow who rides a dragon and wields spear. Oh. And he has green eyes, blonde hair, too. Naruto's gaze, currently very much blue and not under the influence of the glowing green gnosis at the moment, twitched just so. Oi, oi, oi. What ind of stories have people been telling about me? The girl looked to him, blue eyes glistening. Have you seen him? Was she serious? Dvalin aside, he'd never ridden the dragon like that. He was suddenly glad he hadn't summoned Skyward Spine today. His spear was rather distinctive. Thankfully this girl was denser than she looked. He would have made the connection ages ago, but she hadn't. He coughed into his fist to hide a flush. You wouldn't happen to have his name, would you? She thumbed her chin. I believe it began with the letter N? And you're looking for him because? She clammed right up. That's a secret. Nope. Never heard of him. That was a red flag right there. Evade and avoid at all costs. And you are? I'm so very glad you asked. Salutations. She swept aside her cloak and sketched a bow, revealing pale hair, mismatching blue eyes, and a fanciful blue outfit he had no hope of describing, much less that she'd suddenly donned. You have the great honor of addressing Lady VERYYYY, the Hydro Archon. The gnosis pulsed in his chest. Liar. Well, I'll be damned. It was correct. She didn't have one. Are you though? He tilted his head to regard her. Are you really? Of course I am. She stomped her foot with a huff when he gave a shrug. I snuck out for the day. I'm sure Neuvillette will give me an earful for this when I bet back, Boot. His temper sparked, irked by her prattling. Is this going somewhere? I have places to be. Oh. She winced a little. I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. She clasped both hands before herself, voice falling to a small whisper. I'll just be going now, I won't waste any more of your time. Naruto winced despite himself. Where had this gregarious girl gone all of a sudden? She looked so sad, he hadn't meant to hurt her feelings. Naruto, no. Don't fall for the tears. But she really is sad. Don't you dare. He took up the stance Jiraiya had taught him so long ago, drew 1 foot back, and held out his right hand to her. May I have this dance? Her face lit up, the spark of sorrow momentarily muffled by quiet confusion. Eh? Tonight's a festival. You can dance, can't you? Much to his amusement, VERYYYY sputtered, then rallied with an imperious huff. Yes, of course. Can you? Well, he couldn't call himself a man if he didn't rise to a challenge like that now, could he? No siree. Her gaze widened suddenly, taking him in, perhaps seeing something she hadn't before. Wait, are you? He swept her up into his arms and drew her away. Just one quick dance away from praying eyes, he'd send her on her way. She looked harmless. What could possibly go wrong? They danced the night away. Warmth plus sunlight equals soft pillows. Pillow? Error. Does not compute. Critical system failure. Migraine imminent. Ow ow. Naruto creaked, an eye open to an abominable headache and a hangover besides, which spoke volumes to the amount of alcohol he'd consumed last night. Closed said I, groaned once, and buried his face into the first pillow he could find. A strange feeling of weightlessness encompassed him as he burrowed deeper into the bed. This pillow really was quite comfortable, but he paid it no heed. Warm. Soft. Hot. But no longing to move. So he didn't. No siree. Memories were slow to filter back, but return they did. He remembered the Sabzara's festival, dancing with everyone he possibly could. And the drinking. By the sage, the drinking. He'd never drank so much in one night. He didn't think he ever would again, not after a headache like this. Kurama was out cold in the seal. For all intensive purposes he was dead to the world. Could a tailed beast even get a hangover if their host drank more than they should? One way or another, he'd known soon enough. But not right now. Now was a time for sleep. He buried his head into the pillow, reveling in the softness of it as the rest of last night caught up to him. His shadow clones must have been busy, because he recalled multiple, conflicting versions of last night's festivities. Singing and with Nahida, spinning the little goddess round and around. An awkward, stumbling number with a red-faced Dihaya. Swaying softly with a smiling Nilo. Dancing a slow waltz with Lisa. A lively jig with Shinha. On and on the memories went. He drank and danced with so many people he could scarcely recall them all. There had been someone else, too, hadn't there? A girl in blue. What was her name again? Farina? Right. That eccentric girl. He remembered now. She'd claimed to be an Archon, but she wasn't. He'd humored her and granted her a dance, followed by 2, 3, 4, yet still she'd asked for more. And there at the end of it all, like a half-forgotten though or a distant dream, a muggy memory vanishing with the dawn, he recalled someone else. Someone who looked like Nahida, but wasn't Nahida. Taller, older, laughing as she stood upon his feet and let him twirl her about. Thank you for the lovely night. You've made me so very happy. Take care of that little branch for me, won't you? Even her face had become something, a misty memory, gone as he grasped at it. His fingers fisted against the pillow in a rare moment of exasperation. A woman's voice into his right ear. Naughty. To his credit, Naruto froze, but only for a moment. Lisa and Beidou hadn't exactly inured him to waking up with a woman in his bed, but he at least had some tolerance to surprises like these for the most part. All right, calm down, he hissed at his hammering heart. This is nothing you haven't experienced before. We'll open our eyes on 3. 1, 2, 3. Azure orbs drifted open and belatedly, he realized he hadn't been using a pillow at all, rather, his head was nestled between someone's melons. The owner of said bountiful bosom clung to him tightly in sleep, all but curled around him for warmth. Almost as if she were grasping at him or trying to crush him. He wasn't sure which he preferred. Without warning she snuggled closer, shifted her hold, and began spooning him. He curved, clinging to his. And what curves they were. Yup, not Farina. Definitely not Farina. Farina wasn't built like this at all. Belatedly he realized there was another problem. He had absolute no idea who this was. He couldn't see her face. She was presently burying her visage into his shoulder as she embraced him like some kind of giant teddy bear. Her full melons pressed into his chest, while one of her legs twined with his, drawing him closer still, and he shivered a little despite himself. Ashen hair tingled with black tickled his cheek. That didn't bother him. What did bother him was the fact that he'd awoken with a stranger in his bed. He wanted to know who she was, damn it. Preferably without making an arse of himself. Good morning, he tried valiantly. His bed partner stirred a little at that and nuzzled her head into his chest. Too early. He awkwardly patted her back. It really isn't, you know. Sun's up. The as-of-yet nameless woman muttered a string of gibberish that sounded vaguely like a curse and stretched against him, yawning cutely. In doing so, she finally raised her head to look at him. Her eyes drifted open with lazy grace, revealing black pupils bearing vivid red X's across them. Something about the sight of her gaze sent a shudder through him, and not one of fear. His mind fizzled out regardless. Ah, crap baskets. She stared at him for a long moment, eyes half-lidded with sleep, not quite comprehending him at first until she finally did. A fiery flicker of confusion passed through her ravishing gaze, followed by comprehension, then embarrassment. A myriad of other emotions sparked back to life in her, and he sensed each and every one of them before she stifled them, one by one. Well, she muttered in a low, raspy voice that set his very BLD aflame. This is unexpected. Naruto met her gaze evenly in turn, unwilling to make the first move for fear of spooking her. You're telling me? Her brow furrowed as she tried and failed to recall how they'd fallen into bed together. When did we? Dunno, he shrugged one shoulder. I can't remember. Must have been last night. She touched a hand to her forehead. We were drunk? His head bobbed. That much seems obvious. That seemed to annoy her, oddly enough. There must be another reason. Did there have to be? Your guess is as good as mine. I came here seeking something. It was not you. And yet here we are. Naruto settled for another shrug and laid back against the bed. Now that it had become clear that she wasn't going to attack him over something they both initiated, he wasn't terribly bothered. Truth be told, he had no true blue memory of this woman last night, none whatsoever, but then again, he'd been terribly drunk and everything had been a shambling blur by the end of the festival. Same for her, judging by the look on her face. Clearly, she was just as shocked as him. He half expected this eerie wraith of lady to stalk off in a huff. Which was why it came as something of a surprise, a very great surprise indeed, when the mystery woman eased in and kissed him. Slowly, softly, sweetly, her lips lingering on his own now as she pulled her body into his lap and planted her peach there with intent. Despite his better judgment, he found himself responding in kind, arms moving to encircle her waist, holding her peach until she deigned to pull away, taking his very breath with her. Whoa, he managed rather less than eloquently as the stranger pulled back. She hummed after a moment's pause. Satisfactory. I can see why I bothered to bed you. Naruto sputtered, still finding himself at something of a loss. Look, lady, I don't know who you are, but... Her lips found his again, mouth muffling his initial protest until he bit her lip hard enough to draw a startled cry from her. She drew back, mildly amused by the pain he'd caused her. Some fight in you, I see good. Don't bore me, now. I enjoy a partner with some fire. Then you're gonna love me. Not the best line, but he wanted to get the last word in. The mystery woman tilted her head anew, considering him. We shall see. This time when she closed with him, he was ready for her. She dragged her lips over his, tongue tangling with his own. Startled, but unwilling to simply let her have her way with him as she pleased, he seized her by the wrists and rolled over, momentarily pinning her beneath him. Her response was to tackle him in return, pinning him back to the bed, leaving them in the same position as before. Smiling ever so faintly, she planted one palm upon his chest and with the other, took a hold of his right hand and guided it up her melons. From there, she slammed her peach against his with intent and planted her legs on either side of him, simultaneously mounting him and pinning him in place. Prove yourself to me. Her gaze drilled into his, her words a demand as much as a command. Remind me why I laid with you in the first place. Cheeky little fine. Two could play at that game. Careful what you wish for. What followed was a maddened frenzy of lovemaking. His free hand found her flank as she hastened him on, arching her neck back. He laid a series of fiery kisses on her neck and felt his noses flare as he did. If she at all noticed, she didn't much seem to mind. They ravished one another like a pair of wild animals, such was their reckless abandon. Once they'd had their fun, they lay spent and sated, but only for a time. His mystery paramour Rose suddenly stood, and padded about the room, retrieving her attire, and as she bent down, for a single spectacular moment, he was struck by her eerie beauty. Strange marks lined her pale skin, twining up her torso almost like ash. Even her fingers were affected in places. Almost as if she'd been burnt, but no, that wasn't quite right, it was almost as if she were cursed or some such. Surely not, right? Perura, she said suddenly, as though that explained everything. Naruto squinted her. Pardon? I go by many names. She looked over her shoulder at him. Arlecchino is one of them. But you may call me Perura. Is that supposed to ring a bell? If you really don't know who I am, then perhaps it's best you remain ignorant for the time being. She dressed herself slowly, taking time to pull on every garment. In any case, I failed to find what I came to Sumru for, so I suppose a consolation prize will serve. She kissed his cheek and sashayed away, peach swaying. So speaking, she vanished in a rush of flame. I'll see you soon, Anemo Archon. Nahida noticed something. Naruto knew she did, if only because she wouldn't stop staring at him. It wasn't even a judgmental stare on her part, more a curious one, leaving her sat on his shoulders like a sage trying to puzzle out an odd bit of wisdom while he walked. Her small fingers poked at him with nearly every other step, and her questions were constants. As though she were teasing him. Was she? No, surely not. Why are there red marks on your chest? No reason, he replied quickly. She tugged at the collar of his jacket to expose a hickey. It looks like someone bit your neck. A bead of sweat ran down his brow. Dunno what you mean. What's this burn here? Nothing. The little Archon hummed noncommittally and stared him down but didn't speak further on the subject. It was a testament to her age that she didn't have to. She was the Archon of wisdom after all, no matter her current incarnation. She probably saw right through him in any case. That said, if she cared about his little one-night stand, or him sleeping with the enemy, she wasn't giving her opinion for now. Maybe that was for the best. Live and let live, you know? He'd made it abundantly clear that he didn't feel comfortable touching her like that, while she was trapped in this small body. Still, he had the strangest feeling he was being judged just now. Probably just his imagination, right? Kurama snorted. Suyer. Hey! Not helping. While the others were recovering from a night of drinking, and Sage knew what else, he'd opted to take his fellow Archon out for a walk in the hills of Sumuru. She'd been rather insistent on that last part, riding him even more so. Probably for the best, really, for Ina had scarpered back to Fontaine in a mad panic after he'd let her out the closet. Hell, he'd barely gotten a word out of her before she bolted. Something about Sumuru not being safe and Nouvellette being angry with her for being gone so long. He didn't really understand the latter part. The former, at least, made some small semblance of sense. Once again, damn it, Arlecchino. Even when she wasn't here, she was making trouble for him. So troublesome. Regardless, he'd probably see Fuina again soon enough, given Fontaine was likely next destination. Even if some folks were prodding him to visit these Liyue and Inazuma places, his focus remained on Sumuru at the moment. He wasn't trying to be a hero, dang it, he would much rather live a peaceful life, but sadly it seemed that wasn't going to be the case. What he would have give for Paimon to cheer him up right about now, but she was sound asleep with the others, sleeping off the party. She, at least, made him feel better. It was never about saving the world with her, just doing the right thing. Kinda like helping Nahida, you know? He chose to aid her not because she demanded it, but because he wanted to. For someone who was so often denied the freedom of choice, the ability to choose made all the difference in the world. Such was part of the reason he hadn't gotten on with the Knights of Favonius at first, to say nothing of Rosaria. Maeve and Nahida had made no such demands of him, and as such, he'd opted to assist the latter solely for that. Sure, he'd gone through something of a rocky start with others before. Shinha and Beidou and Lisa came to mind, not Nilo or Dihaya, but he didn't quite feel at home with them the way he did with his fellow Archon. Nahida was different. And besides, she'd looked so sad in that cage. And what comes after we've restored her, He wasn't sure. A lot of his work had been wandering thus far. Maybe it had something to do with the gnosis in his chest. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd begun to change. Change. That was the word, wasn't it? There was just so much to change here in Sumeru now that he'd disposed of the sages, things to fix, mend, repair. The withering still needed to be tended to, and while he could and had beaten back with his own vitality, Nahida warned him against it for reasons he still couldn't quite understand. If he could bear that pain so the world wouldn't, then shouldn't he? And restoring her Ga, he didn't even know to do that, or if he could. Everyone was counting on him. Expecting him. Earnest for him. How am I supposed to fix things, here? A brief pang of panic caused his heart to hitch. He found himself hyperventilating a little, sweat beading upon his brow. Hey! Pale hair tickled his nose and he looked up to find the little goddess face inches from his own, upside down. She was standing atop his shoulders, leaning over him, hands on his cheeks, staring intently. You've been quiet a while. Are you all right? Fine. Despite his best efforts he couldn't quite muster a smile. Just stressed. She pinched his cheeks and forced them into a grin. Does this help? He chuckled a little. Honestly? Yeah. Good, humming, she sat back on his shoulders. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. She hooked her pinky finger at him. I promised, remember? Whatever comes our way. His chuckle became a laugh. More walks, then? She beamed. Very enthusiastic walks. Hey, that's my line. Then you should have used it. She looked away from him then, the slightest flush of pink in her pale cheeks. Say, once I have a proper body, I was wondering, could we? A rustles in the undergrowth ahead of them drew their attention. Naruto clicked his tongue and held up a hand before him. Hold that thought. He hadn't been paying attention and that was his own fault, lost in his own little world as he was. Small wondered they'd blundered into these people. They were a decidedly scruffy lot, clad in mismatching leathers and other bits he didn't care for. They looked even worse themselves, scraggly, unclean, haphazard haircuts, a few eye patches and scarves besides. Even their weapons had seen better days, pitted and chipped as they were. And they honestly thought they were dangerous. He counted 6 in total, each of whom moved quickly to surround the two of them. What do we have here, lads? Their leader, some oaf with black hair and a bushy beard bearing a red bandana, slung a spear over his shoulder with a sneer. Some lost travelers looks like they forgot to pay the tax. Nahida tilted her head, pale hair falling across one gleaming green eye. Tax? For the roads, YC. She blinked. But we're not on a road. The bearded buffoon bridled. Well, you still gotta pay it. Naruto sighed. Really? Bandits? Here of all places. What is this, an RPG? Nahida tilted her head further still, quietly inquisitive. What on Teyvat is an RPG? Something from my world. He reached up and over to pat her head, drawing a pleased giggle from her. Think of it like a game. Oh, she steepled her fingers, comprehending quickly. Does that make this a quest, then? The ghost of a smile plucked at his whiskered cheeks. Yeah, I guess it does. Hey, the bandit leader brandished his spear, or was it a halberd? Always so hard to tell, and growled at them, red in the face. Don't ignore us, or there's gonna be trouble. Was this how Orochimaru felt when he stared them down in the forest of death? AMSTR facing 3 idiots, utterly out of their league. A band of fools too brave or too stupid to realize when they were outmatched. He could appreciate the irony, if he still didn't have the best opinion of said Snake Sannin. His eyes narrowed just so, forming azure slits. And what kind of trouble would that be? This kind. the bruiser growled as he threw a punch straight at his face. Slow. Sloppy. Sad. Naruto rolled his eyes and tossed Nahida straight up into the air, sending her flying out of harm's way with a startled shriek. In the same moment he bent backward, leaving his spine nearly parallel with the ground as the punch passed him by and drove a leg upward into the one place no self-respecting warrior wished to be kicked. The thug crumpled with a groan, clutching at his groin. All this, in the blink of an eye, an instant really. Nahida came crashing down out the sky a heartbeat later, hollering at the top of her lungs. Naruto caught the little Archon with a grin. Gotcha. He expected anger, indignation at the very least. Instead she giggled and clapped her hands, utterly delighted. That was fun. Again. Tempting, but no. He waved a hand at the bandits. A blast of wind sprang from his fingers, flinging the fool into his fellows. They went down in a heap of tangled arms and legs, shouting and spitting at one another. With their embarrassment, he hoped that would be the end of it, that cooler heads would prevail and these hapless thugs would realize just how hopelessly outmatched they were. They did not. Much to his annoyance, the arrogant oaf had the will, the gall, to get up again. Ba. So you got a vision, so what? Naruto almost admired his plucky spirit. Almost. Do you have any idea who we are? Should we? He blew out a sigh. This guy had no idea, didn't he? How very sad. We're both Archons, you dolt. Just get outta here already. Nice try, but I ain't fallin' for that. Thumbing a line of BLD from his nose, the bandit sneered at him, leaning heavily upon his spear. But you can't fight us and protect your daughter at the same time. Naruto's jaw clicked open in quiet consternation. Dumbass, say what now? Nahida's face darkened. Daughter? Whoa. Heedless of his impending doom, the dullard dared to point his weapon at her. Get 'em, lads. Take her. Hold down. They made it all of 3 steps. And the earth denied them. Wild thorny roots burst from the soil to snare their feet, their arms, their legs. To a man, the would-be brutes found themselves dragged back down to the ground, forced to prostrate themselves before her. Daughter. Nahida repeated the word softly, dragging out the last syllable in a silken sigh. Did they just call me your daughter? Naruto tried to respond, he really did, she didn't give him the chance. She hopped down fro his shoulders and alighted before him on a swing of green light. With a snap of her fingers, she bound the bandit leader's limbs tightly and used her dendro element to wrestle the man to his feet, dangling him before them like some mad marionette. She hauled him forward with a flick of her wrist. In what world do I look like his daughter? She asked of the now quivering Cretan. Do you see even the slightest resemblance between us? The bandit gulped. And no? Then why did you call me his daughter? Another gulp followed the first. It was a slip of the tongue? I see, she pursed her lips. Stupidity was at play, then. Listen well. That is my partner, my future husband for all intensive purposes. I am not his child. Do you understand? Naruto squawked. The bandit nodded, quick and fervent. She took a hold of his chin. Do you realize who we are now, good sir? Her prey quivered before her, akin to an insect caught in a Venus flytrap. Starting ta. HMHMHM, she hummed, sealing his fate. Ordinarily I would ask for an apology, but you've made me quite angry. I'm afraid you'll have to pay with your lives now. So speaking, she sighed and cast him back down to join his fellows. Such naughty children. Don't make them suffer too long, dear. Ah, good. They were in agreement, then. He was on the bandits a moment later. Poor BSTRDS had a bad time. A very bad time indeed. When all was said and done, and their broken bodies lay before him, he ran a hand through his hair and sighed. Well, would you look at that? Enthusiastic walks made him feel better after all. Nahida hummed. Shall we take another walk? Hell yeah. Good, she hopped back onto his shoulder, humming as they set out. For a moment, I thought you were going to be foolish and draw out the fight for your own enjoyment. Naruto scoffed at the very implication of such a thing. Ain't no one like that around here. Mavuka sneezed. Frowning, she sniffed once and looked about her room. She had the strangest feeling someone was talking about her just now. Naruto and Nahida returned to the city some 3 hours later, their clothes spattered with bandit blood. Each wore the biggest smile, like paired cats that caught the canary. Shinha saw it and couldn't help herself, she pouted. Not fair. The city of Fontaine was quiet that evening, a rare lull in the ever-churning machine of its politics and performances. The grand spires and intricate waterways, usually alive with the hum of conversation and the echoes of artistry, lay dormant under the watchful eye of the moon. Even the canals, ever-flowing and restless, moved sluggishly as if subdued by the weight of the past days. Furina, the Hydro-Archon in name if not in truth, walked the rain-dampened cobblestone streets alone, her footsteps a soft, solitary rhythm against the stillness. The scent of wet stone and brine lingered in the air, a harbinger of the storm that had passed and perhaps of one yet to come. She had nearly died. The thought clung to her mind like a barnacle to the hull of a ship, sharp-edged and immovable. No matter how she tried to shake it loose, it remained, a cold whisper that gnawed at the edges of her composure. The memory of that woman cold, efficient, merciless was a blade at her throat even now. Arlecchino had struck without hesitation, slipping into the shadows as swiftly as she had emerged. And if not for him, for the presence of that accursed blonde enigma, Furina would be little more than a footnote in Fontaine's history. And what had she done since then? Played her part. Smiled her smile. Worn her crown of empty authority while the true ruler of Fontaine watched from the rain. A bitter laugh threatened to escape her lips, but she swallowed it down. What use was it, really? What use was an Archon who could not protect herself, let alone her nation? Fontaine's waters ran deep, but tonight, she felt as shallow as the puddles left behind by the storm. The evening air was crisp, tinged with salt and regret. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, the fine fabric offering little comfort. The grand, glistening halls of the Opera Epiclese were far behind her now. Here, in the lower districts, the city was different, quieter, strppd of its spectacle. The flickering street lamps cast wavering shadows against damp stone walls, their dim glow the only company she had. She came to a stop on a small bridge overlooking a still canal, her fingers curling around the iron railing. The water below reflected the city's lights in jagged ripples, distorting their shapes. She stared down at the reflection of herself, a wavering, uncertain thing, fractured with every tremor of the current. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders sagging. No audience. No judgment. For once, she did not have to pretend. The wind shifted. A subtle thing, but she felt it immediately unnatural in its timing. A whisper against her skin, carrying with it something familiar. A warning. And here I thought you'd gotten lost on your way home. Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, deliberately, she turned. A figure leaned against the lamplight, arms crossed in that easy, infuriating manner. Not him, not the original, but close enough. His golden hair caught the glow of the street lamp, shifting slightly in the breeze. The clone watched her with unreadable eyes, his presence a deliberate intrusion upon the fragile solitude she had carved out for herself. Naruto. Or rather, a piece of him. Furina's fingers tightened around the railing, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. What do you want? The clone's lips quirked, not quite a smirk, not quite a smile. You're far from the grand stage tonight, Archon. A flicker of something dangerous passed through her expression, but it faded just as quickly. And you're far from your MSTR. She tilted her head, feigning indifference despite the weight pressing down on her chest. Should I assume this is a social call, or have you come to remind me of my own insignificance? His gaze remained locked onto hers, unreadable, unwavering. That depends. He took a step forward, the lamplight casting elongated shadows behind him. Are you still so desperate to prove yourself that you'd rather die than accept help? Her breath hitched just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The memory of Arlecchino's blade flashed behind her eyes. The sheer, brutal efficiency with which she had been overpowered. The way her life had been reduced to a mere calculation, a momentary pause in the grander schemes of stronger forces. And the way Naruto had intervened. Her fingers dug into the cold iron railing. She despised it. The powerlessness. The idea that her survival had not been her own doing. Farina lifted her chin, forcing steel into her voice. I am the Hydro Archon. I do not need saving. The clone didn't laugh. He didn't mock. He simply regarded her for a long, heavy moment before finally speaking. Then prove it. The challenge lingered in the air between them, weighty and undeniable. The waters of Fontaine were deep, but so were the burdens of its Archon. And for all the bravado she could summon, Farina knew the truth: she was drowning. The question was, did she still have the strength to swim? You have a bad habit of wandering, the clone said, his voice carrying an irritating ease, as if this were just another casual conversation and not the latest in a series of unwanted encounters. Boss wanted to make sure you weren't getting yourself into trouble. Again. Farina stiffened. You. Not him, the clone interrupted, smirking. But close enough, I suppose. You know how it is. We look alike, sound alike, but I am expendable. Well, mostly. His golden eyes glimmered under the lamplight, an uncanny echo of the originals. You all right there, Your Grace? She scowled, folding her arms. Do I look all right? Didn't think so. The clone exhaled, rolling his shoulders with practiced nonchalance. You get used to it, you know. Almost dying. Hurts less after a while. Well, physically. Mentally? Yeah, that's a whole different thing. Her scowl deepened. You're insufferable. Not the first time I've heard that, he said with an easy grin. Won't be the last. She wanted to wipe that smug expression off his face. The worst part was that he wasn't wrong. Not really. The sensation of near death still clung to her, cold and inescapable. The memory of that blade, of Arlecchino's presence calm, efficient, as though Furina's life had never mattered at all, was seared into her bones. She should have been strong enough to stop it. But she hadn't been. Her fingers dug into the sleeves of her coat, nails pressing against fine fabric. So what? You're his errand boy now? More like his shadow, the clone replied, tilting his head. I go where he doesn't want to, see things he doesn't have time for. It's useful, being in two places at once. His gaze sharpened, tone shifting just slightly. You could use something like that, couldn't you? Furina's grip tightened. I don't need help. His lips curled, but there was something different in his expression now, less amusement, more scrutiny. That's a funny way of saying I almost died and it scared the hell out of me. Her jaw clenched. You don't have to admit it, he continued, leaning against the railing beside her. It's written all over your face. She turned away, gaze dropping to the water. The canal reflected the golden glow of the street lamps, its surface shifting with the occasional ripple, distorting the light. Just like her. Weak. Incomplete. A reflection of something greater, but never the thing itself. A bitter taste filled her mouth. Why do you care? She asked at last, her voice quieter now, barely more than a whisper against the night. The clone shrugged. I don't, really. But he does. That caught her off guard. She swallowed. He sent you? Something like that, he admitted, watching her carefully now. And, well, he tapped the side of his temple. You pick up some of the original's habits after a while. Even the annoying ones. Farina let out a dry, humorless laugh. How tragic. Truly, he said solemnly, placing a hand over his heart. Silence stretched between them. The wind whispered through the empty streets, curling around them like an unseen specter. Fontaine, for all its grandeur, felt terribly small in that moment. Farina turned her gaze back toward the clone. Tell him, she said, voice steady despite the weight behind her words, that I don't need him watching over me. The clone studied her for a moment, something unreadable flickering across his features. Then he smiled soft, knowing. You can tell him yourself, next time. Heat spiked through her face. Was she truly going to let it end like this? Just let him walk away, get the last word in? No. Heavens no. Fake it, till you make it. Wait. Panicking, she surged forward and snatched at his sleeve. Before you go, might I give you a tour of my fair nation? The shadow clone paused. I'm listening. Meanwhile, from the rooftops above, a pair of violet eyes watched the encounter with an expression best described as exasperated disappointment. Neuvillette considered himself a reasonable being. Well, insomuch as he could be, given his role as Chief Justice of Fontaine. He was no true sovereign, but he believed in justice. Order. As befitting for the one who watched over the oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale. Indeed, the oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale was the very epitome of such. Long live oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale. He watched Farina drag a certain blonde gentleman about by the wrist, chattering happily all the way. What the actual F? He disliked this nearly as much as he disliked deep-fried food and grilled food with no sauce. The oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale must be informed. On second thought. Neuvillette sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Farina looked happy. Content, as she hadn't been in years. I am not dealing with this, he muttered under his breath, disappearing into the mist. She can handle her own problems tonight. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Fontaine. So your real name is Perura, eh? Arlecchino's scythe was at the clone's throat before he could so much as blink. Where is he? She demanded, her voice a blade as sharp as the one pressing into his skin. Her crimson eyes glowed like embers in the dim alleyway, their intensity promising pain should he choose to test her patience. Do not lie. You will not enjoy the consequences. I seem to recall both of us enjoying them last time. She hissed and made to cut his throat, only for him to grip the haft of her weapon and prevent her from doing the deed. Good to see you again, too. The clone identical in appearance to the one confronting Farina grinned up at her from his compromised position, utterly unfazed. Now, no need to get violent. Boss wouldn't be happy if you killed me. This was not the original, was it? She could tell. It was weaker. A facsimile, a mere shadow of his true self, imbued with a fragment of his consciousness. Her grip tightened. So he is here. Didn't say that. His smirk only widened, teeth flashing in the low lamplight. Would you believe me if I told you I was just keeping an eye on things? Boss has a habit of anticipating issues. Arlecchino's gaze darkened, her patience thinning. You talk too much. And you stab too much. She twisted the blade just slightly, enough to draw the faintest bead of sweat from him but not quite. Careful, she murmured, her tone deceptively soft. I am not in the mood for games. You wound me, the clone replied, mock offense dripping from his words. Literally. She ignored him. And if I were to remove your head, would he feel it? The grin remained, but something sharp lurked beneath it now. Caution, calculation. Oh ho, someone's been doing their research, the clone chuckled, tilting his head slightly despite the blade at his throat. Let's just say, you wouldn't like what happens next. His golden eyes gleamed with knowing mischief. Why don't we try being civil, You're not my enemy. I'm not yours. Let's keep it that way. Arlecchino's lips curled, unimpressed. You assume too much. And yet, here we are, he mused, gaze flicking over her, measuring something unspoken. If you really wanted me dead, I would be. But you're hesitating. She scoffed. Hardly. Then go ahead, he challenged, voice dropping just slightly. Kill me, for all the good it'll do you, lop off my head here in this lovely alleyway, and let's see what happens next. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with tension. The distant murmur of Fontaine streets was the only sound that filled the void, the city's heartbeat continuing on oblivious to the quiet battle of wills unfolding in its shadows. Then, with an exhale sharp as a knife's edge, Arlecchino pulled back her weapon, her expression unreadable. "Humph. You'll tell him we spoke." The clone chuckled, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the ghost of her blade. "Oh, don't you worry. He already knows." Her eyes flickered with something unreadable annoyance? Amusement? Perhaps both. Then let's hope, for your sake, that he is smarter than you. With that, she made to step back into the darkness, intending to vanish as swiftly as came. She wasn't prepared for the doppelganger's grin. About that. The shadow clone pointed up. Arlecchino reluctantly followed his finger to the rooftops above. Half a dozen blue eyes stared back, their owners each in varying states of readiness. Each were armed. One she might handle alone. But 6? Plus the one currently staring her down. Arlecchino was not prone to fits of swearing. However, here and now? She swore a blue streak. Learned a couple things since I became an Archon. Naruto's clone gripped her scythe and leaned leisurely against it, ready and willing to sacrifice himself if it meant giving his comrades an opening. Always be prepared, be in more than one place at once and never, ever underestimate my enemy. Which are you, Perura? An ally or an enemy? Her hackles rose. My goals align with that of Fontaine. He beamed. What a coincidence. So do mine. Then we have an accord? He wanted to play the intimidation game, did he? Well, Teo could play that game. Tell me, as you're a pale imitation of the original, does he experience everything you do? Yeah, her tormentor granted her a toothy grin that would have been more at home on the face of a beast than a man. He gets our memories, emotions and experiences when we die. Why? You planning on giving us a good one? Arrogant little snit. She wrenched her scythe aside and stabbed 5 taut fingers at his chest. The clone caught her wrist. Naughty, naughty. Fool. Her strike had merely been a precursor to her true goal, getting him to yank her closer. The moment he did, she pushed the full weight of her body against his, forcing him to sit upon the cobblestones. The moment he did, she sat in his lap, crossed one leg over another and stared him down. I'm introducing you to my children. You're their mother now. To his credit, the clone didn't blanch. Shouldn't it be the other way around? No, she shook her head. I am the father. Naruto's shadow clone blinked. Ha! Back in Sumeru. Greater Lord Rukkhadevata welcomed oblivion. It came quietly, softly, like a warm blanket as she spoke to her people for the last time. We all nestle under the great tree of wisdom, peering out to perceive the world. From the earth and from the rain we perceive its wonders until we become a white bird to perch atop a branch and finally snap off the most important leaf. Once upon a time, I alone dreamed in this world. In my dreams, everybody would also dream after they fell asleep. Wild and wonderful thoughts would emerge from their minds. Some would tumble to the ground, and others floated to the sky, connecting all things in this world into a dazzling net. Among a plethora of worlds were numerous smaller worlds, all of fate, finding within the tapestry their brilliant glow. I gradually understood that these indescribable and constantly changing things are the most profound things in the world. Only they can completely repel the madness. Only dreams can awaken consciousness from the deepest darkness. I'm the one who posed this question, yet also the one who sought a solution. Saving the world with the dreams of the people used to be my answer. And now, despite my objections, you've also found your own answer. So I shall return all the dreams to the people. Good night, people of Sumeru. May you be blessed tonight with the sweetest of dreams. It was to be her end. Until it wasn't. No. Don't go. Nahida's voice trembled, her small hands outstretched, fingers grasping for the last remnants of Rukkhadevata's fading essence. The goddess so old, so wise, yet so frail smiled down at her, radiant even as she dissolved into golden light, unraveling into the vast consciousness of Irminsul. Of course she didn't want to go, fragment though she was. But she must. It was the only way to remedy things. And so it must be done. The air was thick with sorrow. The roots of Irminsul trembled, responding to the weight of loss, to the inevitability of what was happening. This is the way it was meant to be, Rukkhadevata murmured, her voice soft as wind through leaves, yet firm, resolute. Naruto stood beside Nahida, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But behind those narrowed eyes, something burned, something fierce, unyielding, unacceptable. Meant to be, he echoed, his voice low, dangerous. Then, with a sharp inhale, he stepped forward, his fingers tightening into fists. Yeah? Well, screw, meant to be. Golden light surged around them, dancing in the air like embers in a storm. The very essence of a god was slipping through their fingers, dissipating into the ether, accepting its fate. But Naruto didn't accept fate. Not then. Not now. Not ever. His hands reached out, glowing with something far greater than chakra or raw power, his will. It flared, wrapping around Rukkhadevata's unraveling form, seizing onto it with an unrelenting force. If you think I came all this way just to lose you, you're dead wrong. Rukkhadevata's ethereal form shuddered, her fading presence caught in an unseen grip, his grip. But. No buts. Naruto growled, his eyes flashing with sheer defiance. You lived once. You'll live again. You'll wake up again. That's a promise. Nahida gasped as the air around them crackled, shimmering with unnatural force. The golden light of Rukkhadevata's essence, which should have long since dispersed, halted, held in place by something beyond logic, beyond divine will. Naruto's hands clenched, his entire being thrumming with power, his very presence forcing the world itself to listen. A tremor shook the realm of consciousness. A great shudder ran through Irminsul, deep in its roots. The air shifted. And then. The golden light coalesced. Not fading. Not disappearing. But reforming. Taking shape once more. A slow, steady breath filled the space. Fingers, once ephemeral, grew solid. A presence, once lost, became tangible once more. Nahida clapped her hands over her mouth, her luminous green eyes wide with disbelief. You did it. Rukkhadevata stood before them, whole once more. Her elegant form shimmered, her long emerald hair flowing as if caught in an unseen breeze. She flexed her fingers, staring at them with astonishment. Impossible, she whispered, feeling her own existence real, present, undeniable. Naruto exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Told ya. Behind them, the silence stretched until a sip broke the moment. Lisa, lounging lazily at a table conjured from the very fabric of the dream realm, lifted her teacup to her lips, utterly unbothered. Well, that was quite the show, she mused, violet eyes glinting with interest. I do hope you're planning on explaining that later. From the side, Shinha scowled, her arms folded tightly against her chest. She shot Naruto a sharp glare, her expression caught somewhere between irritation and something far more difficult to name. TCH. Another rival. Just great. You're angry, aren't you? She puffed out her cheeks, bit her lip, and whirled away from him with a huff. Course ya are. Naruto groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Can I have one normal day? Lisa chuckled, paling the side of her face with an oh-so-elegant smile. Where would be the fun in that? Nahida, still reeling from what had just happened, turned toward Naruto, her eyes filled with something that looked suspiciously like hope. How did you do that? She asked. He looked at her, then at Rukkhadevata, at the golden remnants of power still swirling in the air. Took a deep breath, then grinned. Because I don't believe in meant to be. I believe in what we choose. Rukkhadevata stared at him for a long moment, then, slowly, she smiled. Irminsul pulsed, healthy and restored, whispering in the vastness of the dreamscape, carrying the echoes of something new. Something impossible. Something that shouldn't be possible. Something he had made possible through sheer force of will. Now that we've remedied, you can apologize for making Nahida cry. Ruka blanched. I suppose I'm in trouble, aren't I? How did you do it? He moved a finger into her chest. Never you mind that. Apologize. Now. She latched onto it. I'd much rather you answer my question. Wrong answer. His fingers flitted out quick as a snake and pinched. Ow wow. My ear. All right. I'm sorry. Naruto walked at a leisurely pace through the sun-dappled bazaar, hands folded casually behind his head. To anyone else, he looked as carefree as ever, blue eyes scanning stalls of spices and trinkets with open curiosity. Yet inside, his thoughts were elsewhere. He cast a sidelong glance toward Nahida, who trailed a few steps behind. The petite archon's usual bright demeanor was dimmed, she moved quietly, eyes lowered in distraction. He couldn't help but notice how her fingers fiddled nervously with the hem of her sleeve. Something was weighing on her, that much was clear. He had an inkling of what it might be. The night before, Rukkhadevata had shared a whispered revelation with Nahida, one that left the young lesser lord astonished. Naruto hadn't heard the words himself, his shadow clone dispelled before he caught more than a glimpse, but he'd seen Nahida's reaction. Ever since, she had been lost in her own head, doubt and worry shadowing her face. His intuition and personal experience told him she was grappling with feelings of inadequacy. Inferior, that's how she feels, he realized. Inferior to the wise, graceful predecessor walking quietly at her side. Rukkhadevata, the former Dendro Archon, moved with an effortless poise through the bustling Sumeru market. Despite taking on only a fragmentary form in this era, she still emanated an aura of ancient strength and wisdom, so much so that she inadvertently drew the eye of others. Townsfolk who passed by did double takes, perhaps recognizing in her face the echoes of the beloved greater lord of legend. Nahida noticed those odd looks too, and each one seemed to make her withdraw a little more into herself. Naruto's chest tightened at the sight. He knew that look, the weight of living in someone else's shadow. He had felt it himself once upon, wondering if he could ever live up to his father's legacy or Jiraiya's teachings. That creeping doubt that maybe he wasn't enough. Over time, he had learned to beat those thoughts back with sheer determination and the support of friends. But Nahida, she was so quiet about her pain. Always smiling for others, always brave and gentle. It was easy to forget she might harbor secret fears. Right now, those fears were practically radiating off her small form, like wilted leaves drooping under too much sunlight. Naruto slowed his steps until he was walking beside Shinha and Nilo, who had been following slightly behind. The two women couldn't be more different in appearance, Shinha all cool elegance in her pale robes, and Nilo warm and bright, a dancer's grace in her step. Yet both had become his good friends and companions on this journey. They trusted him, and he trusted them. Now he needed their help. He caught Shinha's arctic gaze first and gave a subtle nod toward Nahida and Rukkhadevata ahead. Shinha tilted her head quizzically. Subtlety was not her strong suit, she tended to face problems head-on or blade-on. Still, she followed his gaze and then raised an eyebrow, realizing something was amiss with the young Archon. Nilo, perceptive and empathetic as ever, was already watching Nahida with quiet concern. The performer in her could sense when a fellow cast member was out of step. She leaned toward Naruto. Is Nahida all right? She seems lost in thought. Naruto flashed a reassuring grin. Don't worry, I've got an idea. Stopping in his tracks, he clapped his hands loudly enough to startle even Shinha. Alrighty, he announced in a deliberately cheerful voice, perhaps a notch too loud. I don't know about you guys, but I could use a break. Shinha, Nilo, how about we go do a little shopping? Nahida and Rukkhadevata paused and turned back at the sudden outburst. Nilo blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. Shinha just looked confused. Shopping, she repeated, as if the word were foreign. It might well be, Naruto thought, recalling Shinha's isolated upbringing on a mountaintop. I don't understand. Yeah. Naruto barreled on, slinging an arm around Shinha's shoulders in a friendly half-hug before she could unwittingly reveal his scheme. The tall Adeptus-trained woman stiffened at the unexpected contact, but he pretended not to notice. We're in the Grand Bazaar of Sumeru City after all. One of the best places to pick up cool souvenirs and snacks. He gestured broadly to the vibrant stalls around them. Vendors hawked glistening fruits, patterned textiles, and spices in every color of the desert. The air danced with a dozen enticing aromas. Shinha eyed a nearby stall piled with strange plush toys in the shape of Sumeru's wild creatures. She gently extricated herself from Naruto's arm. I don't see how purchases will strengthen us for battle, she said frankly. Ever practical, that one. But he could see a spark of curiosity in her normally stoic eyes as she glanced at the colorful bazaar stands. Nilo giggled softly behind her hand. It's not always about battle, Shinha, she said. Her voice had a musical lilt, soothing by nature. Shopping can be just for fun. Or perhaps as a way to make memories with friends? Shinha considered this with a solemn nod, as if Nilo had proposed a new training regimen. Making memories, I see. Cloud Retainer did encourage me to experience more of the mortal world. She looked at Naruto. If this is important to you, I will attempt it. Success. Naruto beamed. That's the spirit. What about you, Nilo? I'm sure you know some great stalls here. Maybe you can show us your favorite spots? Nilo's aqua gaze sparkled. Oh, I'd be happy to. There's a wonderful booth over there selling fragrant tea blends. And a bookstore down the street that carries appealing journals and scripts, though perhaps that's more up Nahida's alley. She glanced toward the young Archon, clearly still concerned for her. At the mention of her name, Nahida managed a polite smile. You all go on, she said softly. I think I'll stay here for now. Her hands were clasped in front of her, almost in a gesture of self-comfort. She tried to sound upbeat, but Naruto caught the wavering note in her voice. Rukkhadevata stepped to Nahida's side, placing a slender hand on her shoulder. I will remain as well, the former Archon said, her tone calm and reassuring. She turned her emerald gaze onto Naruto, a knowing look passing between them. Naruto had the impression Rukkhadevata could read his intentions as easily as a book. She offered him a graceful nod of approval. Go enjoy yourselves. We'll be right here in the square if you need us. Are you sure? Nilo asked Nahida. The dancer reached out as if she might take Nahida's hand, but stopped, respecting the Archon's personal space. We'd love for you to come along. But if you're tired, a rest is okay too. Nahida shook her head, her fluffy white hair swaying. Thank you, Nilo. I'm all right. I'll just get some fresh air and quiet. She looked up at Nilo and Shinha with gratitude. Please, enjoy yourselves. I'll catch up with you in a bit. Naruto sensed the polite dismissal underlying Nahida's words. She wanted them to go on without feeling guilty. We have to give her that space, he reminded himself. He planted his hands on Shinha and Nilo's backs and gently started ushering them forward, away from the two Dendro Archons. Let's not pressure her. She'll be fine, right, Rukkhadevata? He called back. Rukkhadevata offered a serene smile. She will be. Thank you, Naruto. There was warmth in her voice, a silent thank you for understanding Nahida's unspoken needs. With that assurance, Naruto led Shinha and Nilo off down the bustling row of market stalls, leaving Nahida and Rukkhadevata alone in the sunlit plaza. Nahida watched until Naruto's bright shock of hair disappeared into the crowd, Shinha's white locks and Nilo's crimson braids following behind. The sounds of the market haggling vendors, clucking sumpter beasts, and the distant strings of a musician's setter filled the silence that remained. Normally, she delighted in such lively ambience. She loved nothing more than wandering the city incognito, listening to her people's everyday joys and concerns. Today, however, her heart simply wasn't in it. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. A mix of relief and apprehension flooded through her now that she and Rukkhadevata were alone. Relief, because she didn't have to maintain a cheerful front for her friends, apprehension, because she wasn't sure she wanted anyone, even Rukkhadevata, to see the dark doubts swirling inside her. Rukkhadevata's hand remained gently on Nahida's shoulder. The older Archon's touch was light but grounding, like the steady weight of a reassuring blanket. "Little one," she said softly. "You seem troubled." A wry, sad smile tugged at Nahida's lips. She stepped over to a nearby stone bench beneath a flowering canopy of trees. "I suppose I can't hide it from you," she murmured. The former Archon had known her literally inside and out. After all, Nahida was born of Rukkhadevata's own being, a fragment of the whole. If anyone could sense her unease, it was the person sitting beside her now. Nahida settled on the bench, smoothing her modest green skirt. Rukkhadevata sat as well, folding her hands in her lap with regal grace. For a moment, neither spoke. A gentle breeze danced through the tree branches above, loosening a few petals to drift down around them. The quiet stretched, not uncomfortable, but expectant. Rukkhadevata clearly intended to let Nahida find her words in her own time. At last, Nahida took a slow breath and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about what you told me last night." She hesitated, glancing up at Rukkhadevata's face. The older woman's expression was calm and encouraging, green eyes patient. Nahida continued, "What you proposed we might be able to do to help Sumeru and Irminsul, it's incredible. I would never have imagined it was possible." Her small hands clenched in her lap. "Of course you would think of it with ease. You make it all seem so simple." Rukkhadevata tilted her head gently. "It only seems that way because I have the benefit of experience, Nahida. I've walked this path far longer." Nahida bit her lip. "Experience." Her gaze dropped to her feet. "Yes, you have centuries of knowledge, wisdom collected from the moment the world was young. And I have," she swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "I have a few short years of life outside that little sanctuary, and so many gaps in my understanding." "Knowledge isn't everything," Rukkhadevata said quietly. A mild laugh escaped Nahida, brittle and self-deprecating. "Spoken like the true god of wisdom," she replied. "You have enough knowledge to say such a thing. Meanwhile, Her voice cracked unexpectedly and she paused, pressing a hand to her chest as if to steady the ache inside. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm not explaining it well." Rukkhadevata shifted closer, wrapping one arm around Nahida in a side embrace. She stiffened in surprise. Her former self had seldom shown physical affection, at least not so openly. But perhaps the warmth was exactly what she needed, for she felt her composure break like a dam. In a rush, the words poured out. "I feel so small," Nahida admitted, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "Every day I try to live up to what Sumeru lost, what I lost when you—" She stopped, shaking her head. "When we were separated. They all loved you so much, revered you. The greater Lord Rukkhadevata, hero of the people, whose wisdom saved Sumeru time and again. And then there's me, the lesser Lord Kusanali, a mere fragment who stumbled her way through her first real challenge with more luck and help from others than actual wisdom." Her voice wavered. "How can I ever compare to you?" Rukkhadevata's arm tightened around Nahida's shoulders protectively. "Dear one, you shouldn't compare us at all." "But everyone does," Nahida choked. A tear slipped free, tracing a shiny line down her cheek. "For 500 years I was kept hidden, and even when I finally emerged many would have preferred to have you back instead. I can't blame them. You would know so much more, be so much more." Rukkhadevata reached out with her free hand, catching the tear with a gentle swipe of her thumb. Nahida blinked, surprised. Rukkhadevata's touch was usually as ethereal as a memory, but right now it felt solid, real and comforting. The former Archon smiled, a sad and tender smile that held centuries of understanding. "Nahida, look at me." Nahida lifted her gaze. In Rukkhadevata's expression she saw not disappointment or pity, but unwavering love. It was the kind of love a mother might have for her child, or perhaps oneself might have for another if split in two. It warmed Nahida's aching heart, even as more tears threatened to fall. "I am not whole," Rukkhadevata said softly. "Not anymore. I'm only here now because of extraordinary circumstances. By rights, I should have faded completely. What remains of me is but a fragment, as you say. A shadow on a cave wall. She cupped Nahida's cheek in her hand, their matching green eyes level. But you are the part of me that lived on. My legacy, my continuation. In a very real sense, you are all that I am now, Nahida. Nahida's breath caught. That's not true. You're here, speaking to me now. By some miracle or quirk of fate, yes, Rukkhadevata allowed. I am here, for the moment. But this doesn't diminish the fact that you have grown into your own person, with your own wisdom and strength. Did you know, when I first looked upon you after being separated from Erminsel, I was in awe of you? And me? Nahida stammered. The notion was absurd. How could the greater lord be in awe of a small, naive godling who had barely come into her power? Rukkhadevata chuckled quietly. Yes, you. I saw a young goddess who endured centuries of solitude and still emerged with a heart capable of endless love for her people. A goddess who, when danger threatened her nation, forged unlikely alliances and freed her citizens from tyranny. I had help, Nahida interjected, wiping her eyes hastily. Naruto, Nilo, and so many others. I would have failed alone. Seeking help was your wisdom, Rukkhadevata countered gently. Wisdom isn't knowing everything, Nahida. It's understanding that you don't know everything, and finding the right way forward regardless. You did that. You united others, trusted them, and inspired them. That's something she paused, a distant look in her eyes. Even I did not always manage to do in my time. I carried so much myself. Perhaps too much. Nahida sniffled, absorbing Rukkhadevata's words. There was a faint hint of regret in the elder Archon's tone. But you were never alone. You had the sages, the academia you built. Sages, yes, Rukkhadevata smiled wistfully, learned and devout. But I was so exalted in their eyes that none of them dared correct me when I made mistakes. And I did make mistakes. Her voice lowered. The forbidden knowledge that nearly destroyed our land that spread because I, in my hubris, tried to absorb it all myself. I thought I could purify it alone, and in the end I had to sacrifice everything to contain its blight. Perhaps if I had entrusted others sooner, relied on friends as you do, that tragedy might have been avoided. Nahida's eyes widened. Rukkhadevata had never spoken of this before. In the collective memory of Sumeru, the Greater Lord was a flawless savior. Yet here she was, sharing her past failures and doubts. To hear her admit fault was both shocking and strangely comforting. I had no idea you felt that way, Nahida whispered. Rukkhadevata gave a soft hum. It is not widely known. History remembers our highlights, not so our shadows. But you, Nahida, you learned in a few short months what took me centuries, that wisdom must go hand in hand with humility and trust. That is why you succeeded where I could not, in freeing our people from the plots against them. She gently brushed a strand of white hair from her face. You are not inferior to me, dear one. In many ways, you have already surpassed me. Nahida's breath hitched in her chest. Surpassed you? It was almost too much to accept. She shook her head vigorously, but Rukkhadevata only smiled. You see my poise and knowledge and admire it, the older goddess said, silencing her fears. I see your empathy and ingenuity and admire that. Do you know how proud I felt, watching you guide the people during the Sabzara's festival, even while imprisoned by the academia? Or how astonished I was by the clever way you defeated that false god with the strength of everyone's shared dreams? Her eyes shone with fondness. I thought to myself, how bright she shines, my little Nahida. A warmth bloomed in Nahida's chest, chasing away the cold knot of self-doubt that had been lodged there. She recalled those events, how frightened yet determined she had been. At the time, she didn't feel wise or strong at all, but in hindsight she had protected her people in her own way. Perhaps that counted for something, even if it differed from Rukkhadevata's ways. Rukkhadevata continued, tone turning lightly teasing, and as for Grace, you should have seen me in my early years. I was positively awkward at times, though no one would dare say it to my face. She winked conspiratorially. Once, I misremembered a prayer at a public ceremony and ended up blessing a field of Zayton peaches to sprout on a fisherman's boat. The look on everyone's faces. She broke off and laughed into her hand, a musical, bell-like sound that seemed to surprise even herself. It was perhaps the first time Nahida had heard such an unguarded laugh from the usually composed Archon. Nahida couldn't help a giggle bubbling up, tears now turning to laughter. The mental image of the dignified Greater Lord accidentally summoning a peach tree on a boat was too delightful. That really happened? She asked between giggles. Oh yes, Rukkhadevata sighed theatrically. Even the god of wisdom is not immune to the occasional lapse in concentration. So you see, we all grow and learn, sometimes by making fools of ourselves. Nahida nodded, a smile finally breaking through fully on her face. She wiped the last wetness from her cheeks. The feelings of inferiority hadn't vanished completely. Such deep-seated worries rarely disappear in an instant, but they no longer felt so overwhelming. Sitting here with Rukkhadevata, sharing both sorrows and laughter, Nahida felt something shift inside her, a new seed of self-acceptance taking root. Thank you, she said softly, leaning into Rukkhadevata's side. In that moment, she allowed herself to be just a young woman seeking comfort from someone who loved her. Archon titles be damned. I think I understand better now. I won't let those doubts consume me. Or at least, I'll try my best not to. Rukkhadevata placed a gentle kiss atop Nahida's forehead, the gesture so maternal and tender that Nahida felt her heart overflow. That's all anyone can ask. Keep trying, little one. You are more than the sum of what came before. Never doubt that. Nahida closed her eyes and savored the embrace, committing Rukkhadevata's words to memory. I am me, and that is enough. She repeated it in her mind like a mantra. I am enough. They sat like that for a peaceful moment, two archons across time, as petals drifted around them in the soft breeze. Meanwhile, a few streets away, Naruto was having significantly less peaceful thoughts. In fact, at this very moment, a storm cloud of discontent was brewing over the ninja's head, figuratively speaking given his current archon status. He stood in front of a humble food stall wedged between a tapestry merchant and an incense stand. The handwritten sign above the stall cheerfully advertised authentic Inazuma noodles, and best ramen in Sumeru. Seeing those words, his heart had leapt with excitement. After wandering the bazaar with Shinha and Nilo for a while, his stomach and his curiosity got the better of him. He just had to find out what Sumeru's idea of ramen was. At first, he'd been optimistic. The vendor, a middle-aged Sumeru man with a thick mustache, had been delighted by Naruto's enthusiasm. He'd bragged about sourcing noodles from Port Ormuz and exotic spices from the desert. Naruto, practically drooling, had ordered the largest bowl available. Shinha and Nilo watched with amusement as he bounced on his heels in anticipation. Now that same bowl sat in Naruto's hands, and he stared into it with an expression of pure horror. Something was wrong. Very wrong. For one, the broth was green. Not the rich, golden pork broth of Ichiraku's ramen back home, nor the light clear fish broth he'd once sampled in Mondstadt. This was a murky green concoction, filled with floating herbs and a strong, bitter aroma that did not scream ramen to him. The noodles themselves were an unusual translucent white, and when Naruto had tentatively lifted a bunch with his chopsticks, they'd clumped together unpleasantly. He took a taste, one hopeful slurp that very quickly turned into regret. The taste was an off-putting mix of sour and overly spiced, with a strange slimy texture from the noodles. Naruto's face froze. He slowly forced himself to swallow the bite, every muscle in his throat protesting. This is ramen? His mind cried out in despair. It was as if someone had taken the very concept of ramen, dragged it through a swamp of Sumeru spices, and served it with a smile. Across from him, Shinha blinked, head tilted at Naruto's changing expression. Naruto? You look ill. Is it poisoned? Her tone turned vaguely menacing, ready to demand an antidote from the hapless vendor. Nilo put a hand to her mouth, concerned. Oh no, Naruto, what's wrong? Is it not to your liking? Naruto slowly set the bowl back on the stall counter. The vendor's smile faltered. Before he could answer, Naruto dramatically slumped to his knees on the cobblestones. He clutched at his heart. This is the worst day of my life, he proclaimed in a woebegone wail. Shinha crouched, examining him with the sharp eye of a warrior assessing a fallen comrade. Are you wounded? Where is the pain? She clearly did not understand the theatrics at play. It's my soul that hurts, Naruto whimpered. He pointed accusingly at the bowl of so-called ramen. They dared to call that ramen. But it's not. It's a crime against ramen. His voice climbed in volume with each word until he was practically howling to the sky. Nilo couldn't help a tiny giggle, though she tried to hide it behind concern. She patted Naruto's shoulder. I'm so sorry, Naruto. Sumeru's cuisine is quite different. Perhaps we should have warned you that our noodle soup isn't the same as what you're used to. The vendor bristled defensively, quite unaware of who he was. Now see here, outsider, my recipe is beloved by locals. It's a unique blend passed down from. But Naruto was beyond hearing. He lurched upright, staggering back as if mortally offended by the very presence of the bowl. In one melodramatic motion, he flung his head back and roared to the heavens and cried, Why? Why would you do this to ramen? What did ramen ever do to deserve this? His anguished cry echoed through the marketplace. Conversation screeched to a halt. Dozens of shoppers and merchants turned to stare at the blonde foreigner causing a scene over a bowl of noodles. Sumeru City was no stranger to eccentric personalities, but even by local standards, this was something to behold. A few children started giggling at Naruto's over-the-top despair. An old man shook his head, muttering about youth these days. The vendor huffed and snatched the bowl back, possibly more concerned about Naruto spilling it than the insult. Shinha, still not fully grasping the exaggeration, drew herself to her full height and placed a hand on the hilt of her polearm. She addressed the vendor coolly, You. What foul ingredients did you use to cause him such distress? I demand you undo this. For a heartbeat, Naruto worried Shinha truly might use her weapon in the middle of the market to avenge his taste buds. Nilo quickly intervened, stepping between Shinha and the now alarmed vendor. No, Shinha, it's all right, she said hurriedly. The food isn't dangerous. Naruto's just expressive about his ramen. Her eyes twinkled with amusement despite her efforts to calm the situation. She leaned in and whispered, This is normal for him, I promise. Shinha's hand eased off her polearm, though she remained perplexed. He reacts to bad food like this often? Well, maybe not exactly like this, Nilo admitted with a soft laugh. But he does take his ramen very seriously. Naruto, still pouting dramatically, crossed his arms. I have a sacred bond with ramen, he asserted. And this dash, he pointed at the offending bowl, broke my heart. He sniffed loudly for effect, looking like a kicked puppy. Kurama groaned in his head. Drama queen. Shut up. He's lucky I didn't smite him with a storm. Nilo couldn't contain her laughter now. Her giggles were contagious. After a moment, even Shinha cracked a tiny, reluctant smile at the absurdity of it all. Seeing Shinha smile at anything was a minor miracle. Naruto, catching that faint upturn of the usually stoic woman's lips, couldn't resist hamming it up further just to keep the rare smile there. He threw himself at Shinha's feet theatrically. Shinha, you don't understand, he lamented, grabbing the hem of her sleeve. I've traveled across worlds, fought gods and monsters, endured the most perilous challenges, but never did I imagine facing a horror like bad ramen. Shinha looked down at him, deadpan. Rise, Naruto. You are making a scene, she stated, though the corner of her mouth twitched as she tried to maintain her composure. Naruto peeked up, a wide grin suddenly replacing his exaggerated sorrow. He jumped to his feet with a hearty laugh, scratching the back of his head. Sorry, I guess I got a little carried away. Nilo shook her head, smiling. Just a little. Her eyes were bright. Clearly, she found Naruto's antics more heartwarming than bothersome. Many in Sumeru City had been deadly serious for so long under the academia's stern rule. The return of laughter and silliness to these streets was a welcome change. How about we find you something sweet to get that taste out of your mouth? I know a great stall selling Zayton peach pastries. Naruto perked up instantly at the suggestion of a tasty remedy. Pastries? Now you're speaking my language. His recovery was as swift as his despair had been deep. Kurama despaired of it all. You're an Nemo Archon, ladies and gentlemen. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author NeonZangetsu on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.